Welcome to the news. Our main story is a personal one, as is on the news media, politicians, and political discourse in general. The freedom of press is in our First Amendment because we are supposed to be a check on power. But power has corrupted us. We now have power of our own, a lot of it. And we wield that power to suit our own interests. Yes, their own interests. But how do they convince us to go along with their interests instead of our own? What convinces anyone of anything? They make an argument. Or do they? An argument is supposed to be supported by facts and evidence, but too often in political discourse, there is no real argument. There are only assertions and statements made without any real data or evidence to support what they're saying. In order to know what should be convincing and what shouldn't, we need to take a closer look at what an argument actually is. When I say argument here, I'm talking about a logical argument based on sound reasoning. If you want to see through unreasonable arguments, you first need to know how to reason. There are two parts to every argument: one or more premises and a conclusion. A premise supports or leads to a conclusion. You could call them reasons for the conclusion. If it is claimed that the premise proves the conclusion, then it is a deductive argument. If the premise only supplies support for a conclusion, then it is an inductive argument. An argument can be shown wrong by either showing that a premise is false or unsupported, or by showing that the conclusion does not follow from the premise. In this video, I will be responding to a couple of talking points that have been prevalent in political discourse at one point or another. My hope is that you will start to understand what a logical argument is, how illogical much of politics is, who is being downright manipulative, and start to understand how you can reason your way to the truth. Republicans don't even believe in science. They're taking ivermectin instead of the COVID vaccine. In this argument, the premises are in the second sentence. Premise 1. Republicans take ivermectin for COVID. Premise 2. Republicans don't take the COVID vaccine. Conclusion: Republicans don't believe in science. Again, a couple premises that lead to a conclusion. The first premise is ridiculous. You can't really say a whole demographic of people did something. Even if we don't take it as all Republicans, but just the majority of Republicans, the data doesn't confirm that. The second premise is just as laughable. Donald Trump himself is vaccinated.
Both the president and I are vaxxed, and did you get the booster?
Yes.
I got it too. Okay.
There were several Republican politicians that were vaccinated on live television, including George Bush, which he did with all the living presidents, if I remember right. Fox News very famously had a vaccine policy which all of their staff were forced to comply with. Again, even if these premises were true, it doesn't follow that that would mean Republicans don't believe in science. I mean, at first there were some studies about ivermectin helping. I mean, those studies were debunked, but at first it was reasonable to think it was legit. And I mean, not all people probably saw the debunkings. The vaccines were rushed. I can argue why those arguments fall flat, but that's beside the point. They just believe in doing their own research. They don't buy the crap that's sold to us in the news. And they're justified. That's why I made this channel. Because the news and politicians are full of half-truths, narratives, and agendas. If we can navigate this reality logically, then we can see the truth through the lies. It does involve a little work on our part, however, to be informed rather than misinformed. Drag queens are grooming our children at Drag Queen Story Hour. There are no premises here, so we'll have to make a couple assumptions. The underlying argument here is that being a drag queen is inherently sexual, and that drag queens interacting with children is inherently sexual. Therefore, any event which involves any interaction between children and drag queens is equivalent to trying to convert your child into a member of the LGBTQ plus community, or sex slave, or what? I guess they never really say what they're being groomed for. The logical reading of this argument would be: premise 1, being a drag queen is inherently sexual in nature. Premise 2, any interaction between a drag queen and a child is inherently sexual in nature as well. Conclusion, any event involving children and drag queens must be grooming our children. Now we have our couple of premises that lead to a conclusion. First premise is just ridiculous on its face. Calling drag inherently sexual is like calling cosplay or theater inherently sexual, or costume parties on Halloween for that matter, or a plethora of performing arts. As for premise 2, really? Saying any interaction between drag queens and children is sexual is like saying any interaction between a child and a sports or amusement park mascot is some furry's fetish fulfillment? Or that a child seeing a live musical with any type of flamboyant costume is inherently sexual? And that just leaves the conclusion. Well, it doesn't logically follow that the two premises would lead to the conclusion. If the premise were true, then it would follow that an event involving a drag queen and children would be sexual in nature, but not grooming. Grooming implies teaching and prepping. If the premise were true, which, again, it's not, then I could see a conclusion that these kids would be sexualized, like being treated like your crush and hitting on them? I don't know, gross. Anyway, parents are obviously not taking their kids to events to be hit on. Since we're on the topic, here's a little data about pedophilia not being about hetero or homo. It's more about availability. There's no real proof of homosexual pedophilia, let alone any data on drag queens. There is, however, plenty of proof of pedophilia amongst family or at church or Boy Scouts. So, who's grooming the kids again? I know these examples are straw men of what most people think, but I have heard them anecdotally on the news and from politicians. I'm sure most of you have as well if you pay attention to politics. I'll cover the straw man, anecdotes, and many other logical fallacies in my next video. The logic behind the lies. I hope that you're starting to see the power of logical reasoning to decipher the truth from all the information coming at us. This is just one step in our mission to think for ourselves. Think for yourself shouldn't just be a slogan. There is a right way to think for yourself. It is a powerful tool if you wield it properly. Please like and subscribe if you like the video. As I said, next time I'll be covering logical fallacies in political discourse. Anyways, think for yourself. All right, get out of here. I got stuff to do.